acknowledgement comes from the Oregon Education Association, and it goes like this. We pay homage to those stolen from Africa, placed in chattel bondage, forced into labor and called slaves, to those who lost their lives blasting through the mountains to build the transcontinental railroad, and to those who labored in our fields to feed the world. We honor their ancestors for the forced, unpaid, underpaid, and exploited labor that built much of the Americas. To their Indigenous, African, Asian, and Hispanic forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation, reparations, labor protections, due process, and equal access. For it is through this and justice that we truly give honor. So thank you for taking a moment with that. And now I will go over the ground rules for the event. So these were sent to each of the candidates ahead of time, and each of them agreed to abide by them. As the moderator, I will ask questions and enforce the ground rules. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes for an opening statement and up to 2 minutes to close. The candidates listed first alphabetically by last name will give the first opening statement. We'll go alphabetical for opening and reverse alphabetical for closing. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. The timer will be shown on the screen. The screen turns yellow when there are 15 seconds left and turns red and displays the word stop when time is up. At that point, the speaker can finish his or her sentence, and we've agreed to just work together to make sure folks don't go excessively over time. Questions have been developed by league members and also submitted by members of the public. There might not be time to get to all questions, but we will do our best. Candidates have not been given the questions ahead of time. Viewers, as I said, are invited to submit questions using the Q&A function. And a final note on recording, we're going to record this and it'll be available on our YouTube channel after the event. But we work really hard to provide complete and accurate information to voters in alignment with our mission statement. And so to that end, we ask that you refrain from recording this on any personal devices or circulating clips or excerpts of tonight's event. We'd like, if the event is going to be shown, that it be shown in its entirety so that all statements are, the context for all statements is included. And we ask also that the recording only be shared with our express permission. Now, some information about the King Conservation District, also known as the KCD. The KCD is a non-regulatory special purpose district funded mostly through per parcel charges. Its mission is to promote the sustainable use of natural resources through voluntary stewardship. The district provides education, technical assistance, and cost sharing to residents in the areas of forest management, farm conservation planning, wildfire prep, and streamside and shoreline enhancement. It also provides grants and works with cities and other organizations to support community gardens, urban forest canopy, and local food systems. KCD's service area includes 34 cities and all of unincorporated King County, with the exception of the cities of Enumclaw, Federal Way, Milton, Pacific, and Skykomish. Those cities don't participate in the district. The district is led by an all-volunteer 5-member Board of Supervisors. 3 of the members are elected, while the other 2 are appointed by the Washington State Conservation Commission, an agency created to assist and guide conservation district activities in Washington State. KCD elections occur annually during the first quarter of each year. Elected supervisors serve a 3-year term. This election is for position number 3 on the Board of Supervisors. Now let's begin. Before I invite opening statements from the candidates, it's my pleasure to introduce them. They are in alphabetical order: April Brown, if you want to wave when I call your name, Chenka Favarini Chorba, and Chris L. Porter. We've asked the candidates to cover the following points in their 2-minute opening statements: why they're running for office, their qualifications, and what they would most like to accomplish during the upcoming term. We will start with April. If our timekeeper is ready, April, once the time shows up, you'll have 2 minutes. Okay.
Hello, my name is April Brown. I'm an enrolled member of the Muckleshoot tribe. My passions are with crafting and creating by giving a second life to household items that would normally be thrown away. And with that, my the reason why I'm running for the King County Conservation District seat is to just help amplify some education and knowledge around what the King County Conservation District does, what it can do for communities. And a lot of people within, I would say, Southeast Auburn don't really know what the Conservation District does. They never really heard of it. And a lot of it is just access and education. So with that, I just hope to promote access, education as a tool to provide services to other communities within King County.
Excellent. Next is Chenka. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. First, I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and the organizers of this event. My name is Chenka Favarini Torba, and I'm honored to be running for King Conservation District Board of Supervisors. I've dedicated my career to conservation and to ensuring that the use of our natural resources is sustainable and responsible. And I'm running because I believe that real change is made at the local level, and that our parks, backyards, and community gardens, our forests, and our farms offer us the key to both mitigating and adapting to climate change. I'm unique among the candidates because I have extensive experience crafting, advocating for, and implementing conservation policy. This means that I already have a deep understanding of what it takes to turn policy into change on the ground. If elected, I would focus on 5 main priorities. First, increasing access to existing programs and services, including for marginalized communities who may have encountered barriers to participation in the past. Second, beyond just working with existing landowners, I'd like to see the Conservation District help to reduce the barriers that historically excluded communities face when it comes to acquiring land. I believe that greater diversity and equity in land ownership will lead to healthier ecosystems and healthier communities. Third, there are so many different ways that the Conservation District can engage with, learn from, and support tribes in our region, and I'd like to make sure that those opportunities are fully explored and resourced. Fourth, let's talk about carbon. The Conservation District can and should play a role in encouraging increased carbon sequestration and storage across our lands and waters. And finally, we all know that not enough people vote in this election. But beyond that, most people don't realize that you have to own property or land to run for this office. That's unacceptable. Statutory changes are necessary to make this election more equitable and accessible. As you can see, I've got lots of ideas. I'm eager to take on this role, and I hope that I will earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, Chris, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Chris Porter. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a nurse, a conservationist, and the vice chair of the King Conservation District. 25 years ago, when I got on a bicycle, I had no idea that the road would lead to conservation, removing beef, pork, and lamb from my diet because of the environmental impact, changing our lawn to a certified natural habitat for bees, birds, and other pollinators, and moving our gasoline vehicle to an all-electric. Conservation just isn't an office for me, it's a way of life. Conservation is only differed by gender in over the 75 years in its existence. So when I became the first African-American out gay male elected to this position, not only in the county, but across the state, it led me to introduce a diversity, equity, and inclusion resolution into conservation. Conservation has lagged behind all other sectors when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've helped to integrate it into the Conservation District, and we hired a new executive director committed to environmental justice. Our elections are hidden and exclude voters. This is historically offensive to me, not only as an African American, but also as a precinct committee officer dedicated to engaging people to vote. I've testified alongside the League of Women Voters in Olympia about Conservation District election reform. This must change. Whether I'm elected or not, my true passions are cycling and beekeeping. 1 to 3 bites of food are available to us because of bees, and yet their population continues to drop. I'll continue to engage people around priorities of clean water for our salmon and orca, preservation of habitats and farmland. But I also want to engage people around preserving and helping survive their survival of birds, bees, and butterflies. Without that, they cannot survive. I ask for your vote and thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Now we'll move to the questions, and you'll each have 1 minute to respond. I'm going to rotate who goes first. So we'll start this question. We'll start with Chinka. What are your thoughts about the system of rates and charges currently in place for the district? If you'd like to see changes, what would they be? And we have our timekeeper. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. I have to admit that I'm not the most educated on the specifics of the rates and charges, but what I think is important is that we need to be thinking about a diversity of funding sources for the conservation district. Coming from just rates and charges is fine for what's been accomplished so far, but I think we can really expand the funding sources, including through things like carbon payments and working with counties and community partners to really access the different types of funding that might be available from federal sources, from carbon payments, payment for ecosystem services, to really ensure that we have a healthy finances for the conservation district so we can achieve all that we need to achieve together with our partners.
Okay, thank you. And next up, we'll have 1 minute for you, Chris. Go ahead.
Thank you. The Conservation District actually has a variety of funding sources on federal grants and other forms of funds available to us, but the rates and charges are specifically kind of a headache because there's always a cap, and we work so hard to push it to its current cap. What we're aiming for is flexibility in that, which would allow us to have a greater funding source. We know that at the current level, we will eventually run out of funding sources as we expand our services and include marginalized and left out communities for greater services. So we are working hard with King County elected officials to raise that rates and charges level, and even working harder to give us control of when that rates and charges can be changed instead of the process outlined in King County. Thank you.
Okay. And you have 1 minute. Same question to you, April.
Honestly, I have no idea what that means. I don't understand the question, so I'll have to pass.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this time we'll start with you, April. And the question is, what ideas do you have to raise the profile of the district throughout King County to encourage greater public involvement? Go ahead.
I don't know. I guess I would have to take a look at what was done in the past and to see if that can be elevated or expanded upon. And reach other areas that maybe weren't considered before. Because I know that a lot of people in my community have no idea what this district does. And they kept asking me, you know, what does the King County Conservation District do? And why are you running? And a lot of them had no idea, you know, lived in King County their whole life, and they didn't even know about this program. So just a lot of expanding the education and knowledge of the presence of KCD.
Thank you. Chris, we'll go to you next. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. One of the things I'm dedicated to is raising the profile of the Conservation District. I think everywhere I go, now I'm sort of known as the bee person, and engaging people around that. And it is so nice and comforting to know that that word is getting out and people are paying attention. Some of the things that we've done before and continue to do are arranging tours so people can see the work that the Conservation District is doing. We have listening sessions coming up in the month of February, and I encourage everyone to go to our website and look for those listening sessions and please, please, please participate, and just simply being a good steward of conservation. It's great that we're all going to run for the office. It's great that we all have experience, but I think also it matters a lot when I knock on people's door and say, I'm a beekeeper. I'm invested in how this plays out, the survival of bees and pollinators in our community, in our county, in our state. That I think makes a difference.
Okay, and Chenka, we'll kick it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a number of things that can be done. I do think election reform will help with this, because as soon as people see something on a general ballot that they get automatically mailed to them, then they'll start to ask questions about what it is. I think also people need to be able to see themselves in the conservation district, which means that the conservation district needs to be able to offer programs and services that are relevant to a diversity of communities. I think the listening sessions that Chris mentioned are going to be really important. I think a key to that is going to be, how do you reach people that don't already know about the conservation district, and how do you get them to engage and come? I think you accomplish that by having really creative partnerships, by reaching out to organizations and community groups that aren't necessarily conservation related, but may have an overlap. Things like even churches or community groups that might have a garden in their on their lot. So that way you can reach voters and people who wouldn't ordinarily know about what the conservation district does.
Okay, let's move to our next question. And for our viewers, as you're listening to the candidates, if anything they're saying gets you thinking about a question, you're welcome to put that in Q&A, and we will have that queued up after our pre-submitted questions are done. So, okay, so we have a question about partnerships. And this question will go to Chenka first. The question is, what ideas do you have for establishing or strengthening the district's partnerships with local schools?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because so much of conservation and embodying the spirit of conservation comes from people knowing about it from a really young age and getting engaged with the natural world from when they're kids on. And so I think educational programs that can be placed within schools are going to be really important for the conservation district to embark on. Even thinking about providing curriculum for teachers to implement in their own classrooms. And that way they know that the conservation district is a resource for those things, and they can come back to the conservation district for other questions and support later. I think getting kids out into nature is also going to be really important. And so Chris mentioned the tours. I think getting kids on those tours is going to be really great, so that again, they can feel that excitement and feel the connection to nature from a very early age.
Okay, Chris, you'll go next.
Thank you. First, we continue to work on strengthening those partnerships across, whether it's with the Black Farm Collective or Latino farmers. It continues. One of the things I'm working on is introducing mason bees to the Seattle School for Boys, because they have a garden, and I know that this is a way to get that garden to flourish. They become stewards because they take over it. They figure out this connection. They see it day to day when it's happening. I can't wait to do that. Engaging high schoolers, we bring high schoolers to our nursery to help us organize and get ready for our Bare Roots plant sale that we have every spring or every winter. Again, those tours, and also being a speaker, going to these high schools and say, I'm a conservationist, I'm a beekeeper. Let me talk to you about how you can change the world one plant at a time or one process at a time. And then just simply being that good steward. Thank you.
Okay, and April.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. The question is, what ideas do you have for establishing or strengthening the district's partnership with local schools?
I think a really great idea is to just engage in as many schools as possible, because a lot of kids learn visually and hands-on, and they take those same curiosity and that same questions to home to their parents, who might not have known about these things before. So just a small presentation with the elementary, an outing, I think anything to engage school-age children, and knowing what conservation is, knowing how important the bees are to their gardens, to their mom's gardens, and just really engaging all of the little brains out there. I think they're all very great.
Okay. So this next question, we'll start with you this time, April. And the question is, what do you see as the major issue facing the district during this next year, and what plans would you propose for addressing it?
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, sure. What do you feel like is a major challenge that the district is trying to confront in 2023 to 24?
I'm not sure. Well, I've never, I guess from my own personal standpoint is just knowledge, being aware that KCD exists, because it's, you know, like I keep mentioning, a lot of people in my community didn't know KCD exists, and they didn't know that it was an entity within King County to help preserve our backyards. So just doing marketing and education to reach those of us who didn't know about KCD before.
Okay, and Chenka, same question to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the major challenges is just going to be ensuring that our definition and understanding of conservation evolves with the current crises that we're facing. And I'm thinking about the climate crisis, but I'm also thinking about the crisis around equity and environmental justice in our communities, and making sure that what the services that the conservation district are offering speak to addressing climate change, but also really speak to supporting and uplifting those that are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And I think that the Conservation District has some of that in what it's doing now, but it's going to be a real opportunity and challenge, frankly, for the Conservation District to embrace targeting its efforts to the communities and individuals that are disproportionately impacted by climate change and these impacts.
Okay, and Chris, I'll ask it again just because I think it's a little easier for me to remind myself where we're at. So what do you see as the major issue facing the King Conservation District in 2023-24, and what plans do you have to address it?
Thank you. So there are a couple of things. The economy, because we don't know where it's going, there's a lot of talk about that. When we talk about funding sources, being able to secure that, it's hard to ask for rates and charges if there isn't any money, or taxpayers are anxious about that. So always talking to community about what we do with their funds and how important it is to continue to get that engagement. I'm one of those newer faces to conservation, introducing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the hope is that other folks who look like me will want to engage. And so I always think about that in everything that I'm doing, that the face of conservation has to change. It has to go just beyond gender differences, which is what it been its mainstay. But the thing that just really got me was fire. Fire prevention has to be a cornerstone. I lost beehives because of the overwhelming smoke in King County. So we've got to prioritize that. And we have programs, and I certainly want to see those programs elevated. Thank you.
Great. So this next question, Chris, we'll start with you this time. And the question is, what do you think the district can do to help address climate change or mitigate the impact of climate change in our region? What steps might the district take?
Thank you. That question is loaded. We could talk all night about that. But things like tree canopies in communities of color, which have not kept up with white communities, is one thing. Fire prevention in urban and rural forests are very key to that. And getting people out in the community, whether they live in the urban, rural, or suburban areas, to get them engaged in the conservation that exists where they live. We all have it in our backyards. So we have to find ways to bring people out of their houses and into the community. Again, as a beekeeper, and I just can't talk enough about that, that is an excellent tool to get people out because they're right there and most of us don't notice it until it's brought to our attention. So I'm dedicated to getting people out of their houses and saying, hey, look at this, it's right here. Yes, this is what you can do to do more of it. Thank you.
Okay, and April, same question to you. What do you think the district can do to help address climate change or mitigate the impacts of climate change locally?
Thanks. I would definitely have to agree with Chris with the tree canopies because I really think it allows for cooler spaces, and that allows for more people to want to be outside. And it allows for streams to be cooler, so our salmon can return safely and spawn safely. And I really don't think that leaves falling on the ground should be a reason why a tree should be cut down. It's just ridiculous. That's what trees do. I mean, so, but I definitely think education and community involvement, especially when it comes to clearing drains because of those leaves, is a really good place to start.
Okay, and Chenka, let's hear from you on the district mitigating the impact of climate change.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about mitigating climate change, we have to talk about the root of climate change, which is carbon emissions. And I think that, again, this is a place where the conservation district can really lean in a lot more than it has, because so many conservation practices do result in increased carbon sequestration and storage, but many people might not know exactly what the impact of their conservation practices could be, or they might not know if they do certain things slightly differently, then they could increase carbon storage and sequestration that much further. But when it comes to then the impacts of climate change, which is different than mitigating climate change itself, I think we do need to focus at the local and community level to ensure that we're planning ahead for the impacts that we know are coming. We need to be talking about urban tree canopy cover. We need to be talking about green stormwater infrastructure. We need to be talking about riparian restoration to cool streams, to purify our water, and to protect our salmon and orcas and other important species.
Okay, and our next question is actually about our water supply, and this time we'll start with April. The question is, increased development and pollution affect our aquifers and groundwater supply? Does the Conservation District monitor groundwater, and what does it propose to do about these changes in groundwater pollution?
I am not sure if the county monitors the groundwater. That's something I never really asked before. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to answer this question.
Yeah, I think let me ask it slightly differently in the interest of kind of getting information to the voters. What would you like to see the district do to improve groundwater quality?
I'm not sure.
Chenka, can we go to you next?
Yes. So I think one of the things that's going to be really important in terms of groundwater and purifying water systems is just green stormwater infrastructure. And the thing about green stormwater infrastructure is that a lot of the times it's just planting trees, or it's planting native plants, and it's reducing impervious surfaces. And those things all have other benefits beyond just protecting our watersheds and ensuring pure groundwater. They also have benefits for capturing carbon and for cooling our streets. And so I think that a lot of what the conservation district is doing already to a certain extent can have an impact on groundwater, because it is also because of the work that they're already doing. But I think that there's probably also some awareness that can be raised around the sources of pollution and how they impact groundwater as well. And that's a role that the conservation district can play as well.
Okay, and Chris, if you have the question in mind, how do you see the district improving groundwater quality in King County?
So there's a couple of things. Working with the county, because they do a fair amount of water testing, but also remembering things like getting people to pick up their dog poop. We're a population that's growing and we love dogs, but we're not very good stewards about that. Those tend to affect the water. In our farmland, working with the farmers and the chemicals and things that they use, that it doesn't get into to the water source. Soil testing is that beacon. It tells us what's going on. And if it's in the soil and it rains, it goes further down and gets into our water supply. So we do soil testing, and it helps people understand what's going on, not only with the soil they want to use, but the stuff below it, the water. And also, none of this makes any sense if we don't engage community and tell them what all of this is about, and share with them that they can do soil testing, that when you don't pick up the dog poop, it impacts the water, the salmon, the orca. It's all connected. You manage to merge their lives with the environment.
Okay, thank you so much. So this is kind of a broader, expanded version of a question I asked earlier about school partnerships, but this question is, what are your ideas for engaging the citizens of your district in activating the district's plans for the future? Let's see, Chris, we'll begin with you this time.
So I'll begin by saying, when people found out I was a beekeeper, anytime something happens with bees, I get tons of email. And what that speaks to is community engagement and awareness. That when people know about it and they see how they fit in it and they see how it fits into their life and their community, then you get them engaged. That is what we have to do. When we do these tours, we're also letting others know in the community, this is what's going on in your backyard that affects the environment, that affects how you live and your property line. And what is it that you'd like to know more about? Those are the things that the Conservation District continues to do. And we want to make sure not only, engaging students, which we do, but like our listening sessions, that people come and they learn about it and they ask us some tough questions. Why don't we know about this? Why are your elections the way they are? Through community awareness is the only way we can do this.
Okay, Chenka, we'll go to you next. What are your ideas for engaging the citizens of your district in activating the district's plans?
Yeah, I think so much of it is just about person-to-person communication. I think that we need to be having more events in the community and events that speak to diverse interests and needs, so that, again, people can really see themselves in the work of the Conservation District. So many people in my sphere really know of the Conservation District purely because of the native plant sale. And that's a really great opportunity to engage, but it shouldn't end there. At the native plant sale, there should be more information about the other opportunities that landowners and community members and residents could have to engage in the Conservation District. There should be more board members present at the native plant sales and present at the various events that the Conservation District runs, so that there can be that direct communication between the folks that are directing policy for the organization and the people that are going to be most impacted by it.
Okay, and April, we'll go to you next. What are your ideas for engaging the people in your district in your plans and activating the district's plans?
I guess I would have to take a look at what was done, what tried to be done, and what didn't work. Because without knowing the history of what KCD has done or has not done, I won't really know how to move forward, or I don't want to already do what somebody had done before. And so I would just try to do some deeper research and history on what sort of engagement was done. For myself, I did not know about the native plant sale until 2 years ago. So a lot of this is still very new for myself and for my community. So it would just be a lot of what worked, what didn't work, what was tried, and go from there.
Okay, so this next question has to do with funding. So, and Chris, we'll begin with you. What do you think of the effectiveness of the member jurisdiction grant program? Are there any changes you'd like to see in how grants are awarded or how that program is carried out?
So I love the membership jurisdiction grant, and I would love it if we, and I will continue to work, for instance, bringing Federal Way, Skycomish, Pacific, and the others back into that. But what I'd like and what we're working on is to not make the application so cumbersome. Applications scare people, and we're working to streamline it to make it easier. You're never going to get people to engage in that, and maybe only at the city level because they understand contracts and heavily weighted applications. So our goal is to streamline that and make it user friendly and more to the point, working as we've done with a farmer's application, offering it in multiple languages, that interpretation has happened by folks who speak the native language and that they're paid for those services. So those are some of the things that we can do.
Okay, and April, we'll go to you next. What do you think of the effectiveness of the member jurisdiction grant program, and are there changes you would want to see?
I don't even know what that looks like, so I would have to skip this question.
Okay, and Chenka?
Yeah, I would have to say that I would have to do some learning from other board members and from staff on this particular program before really speaking about it with confidence. But what I will say is that I agree that grant processes can be inaccessible to many. Oftentimes grant applications are cumbersome and have lots of technical language in them that makes it challenging for the everyday person to understand what is required of them to apply, what they might get from it, and what the requirements of the program itself might be once they've received funds. And so I think it's really important to simplify that, and then also to engage communities on what they can accomplish by applying for grants and what that might mean for their individual properties as well as for their communities, and what they can achieve in terms of conservation through those grants.
Okay, the next question has like a little bit of a wordy intro, so just bear with me. It's all related. And Chenka, we'll start with you. So the district operates several different programs, including education and technical assistance to residents with marine or freshwater resources, farm conservation planning, restoration and improvement to landowner riparian zones, wildfire prep, forest stewardship, local food, and more. Which of the district's many programs do you think are the most important for the upcoming years? And which do you think should be scaled back or eliminated, if any?
Yeah, it's a tough question because it's hard to pick a favorite. I think, and I'd have to again understand a little bit more about the effectiveness of these programs, because I think my answer would be I want to uplift the programs that are reaching the most people and having the most impact. And so whether that's the native plant sale, because that seems to be the thing that most people know about, or whether it's around local foods, because that has such a huge impact on providing food sovereignty or providing food access to communities who are in need, or whether it's wildfire prevention, because that can be literally life and death for folks. These are all really important programs. And I want to make sure that whatever we're uplifting in the coming year are ones that are effective and important to members of the community. In terms of scaling back, I think we just, again, want to look at what is not serving the community, what is not relevant to the community as it stands now.
Okay, thank you. And April, we'll hear from you next about which programs do you think are the most important for the upcoming years and which should be scaled back or eliminated?
That's a difficult question because I never really got to review the whole grant process through KCD. So I guess I really don't have much input for this question.
Okay, Chris, let's go to you.
Gosh, there's so many. So first, forest, both urban and rural forests, we just have to pay more attention and pour all we can into that. More than ever, fire prevention. We can do more. We're expanding that program. We have to do more. This last fire season was very scary because we never see this kind of stuff in King County. And as I said earlier, I lost a beehive because of being overwhelmed by smoke from local fires. Beefing up the urban and small farmers. We're saying that farms are dropping and that they're important to us. We have that opportunity. We're going to do it. Again, that farmer application in multiple languages to streamline that process to help those who found that help difficult because of language barriers. Tree mitigation, when organizations or there's construction where they tear down trees, we want to replace them, and we want to help build those tree canopies in urban neighborhoods as well. Those are the things I certainly like to see improved.
Okay. So this question, we're going to begin with you, April. And the question is, do you see a role for the Conservation District in promoting and helping to fund rooftop gardens? And if so, how might that work?
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of rooftop gardens. I just don't think they're safe and effective. And I think they could put a lot of strain on the roof and the structure of the building. But that's just me. So.
Okay, fair enough. Chenka, let's go to you next.
Yeah, I love that question because I think it's such a great idea because it speaks to some of what I've been thinking about, which is, again, making the conservation district's programs and services relevant to its constituents. And, most people in the county live in urban areas, and a number of those people live in apartment buildings where they don't necessarily have access to green space. They may have a balcony, they may have some small area that they can go outside, but being able to have rooftop gardens where food can be produced, where there can be cooling impacts, where it can insulate the building. These are all really important things, really important services that could be accomplished in areas that otherwise would not have green space and would not have access to those services. And so I think it's a really great idea. And I think the Conservation District could follow similar processes that it does with promoting community gardens that are on the ground, and just use those same kind of principles for rooftop gardens as well.
Okay, and Chris, what about you?
Rooftop gardens are amazing. I live in West Seattle. There's a lot of apartment complexes. I'd like to see more rooftop gardens than the ones that I'm aware of because of the things of just the calming effect it has on all of us when we participate in gardening and growing our food and flowers and just having that environment close to us, whether it's on the rooftop or we can walk to it. One of the challenges are all the codes that involve around having a rooftop garden. Fortunately, at the King Conservation District, we have a code specialist who just deep dives into it to figure out how this is going to happen. So we certainly have the tools. One of the things I'd like for us to do is that as we know of these apartment complexes and spaces that are coming up, to early engage and say, hey, how about a rooftop garden? We have resources. I think we can make this happen. That is certainly something we can do at the Conservation District.
Okay, this will be our last question before heading into closing remarks. And the question is, who are your role models for conservation and why? And Chris, we'll start with you.
So Jeanette Dorner is a supervisor in Pierce County. And when I first attended this one meeting and I asked a bunch of questions, she said to me later on, I had my eye on you. I thought you were going to really jump into this, which I did. And I really appreciate the support and the energy she has given me and prompted me with to do the things that I have done in conservation, the DEI resolution, speaking up about the voter situation, and just making this space a little better known and trying to create space for folks that look like me who've historically not been there and not had that opportunity. And so I never want to waste that when I think about Jeanette Dorner in Pierce County, in the Pierce Conservation District, and all the support that she's given me. And it just matters a great deal to me. Thank you.
Okay, and April, how about you?
I think I would have to say my late father, who in a way I'm doing this for, because he had worked 40 years in the tribal fish hatchery. And now I feel that it's my time. I have to protect that work that he did. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Thank you. And Chenka?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was Rachel Carson for me. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, and that's the home of Rachel Carson. And when I was in 4th grade, we went to her homestead, and I just learned so much about how she, as a woman in the 60s, put herself out there and wrote sort of the formative text on environmentalism for that time, sort of against all odds, and really just found the way to use her voice and raise the alarm bells for the crisis at that time. And I think we just need more and more people to do that. And that's sort of the role that I hope to fill, both in this conservation district election, but also just in my personal life, kind of following in her footsteps.
Okay, thank you to everybody who submitted questions. And for those of you who submitted questions that we did not get to, I will forward them along to our candidates. So hopefully they'll have an opportunity to answer them offline. And thank you, candidates, also for your thoughtful responses. It's now time for closing statements, and you'll each have 2 minutes to give it. I'll reverse the order of our opening statement period. So Chris, you'll go first with your closing. You can get 2 minutes on the timer. Go ahead.
And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for providing this forum for us, and the other 2 candidates for joining in. It's been great. Conservation is not just an office for me to hold. It is a way of life, as I stated earlier. I care deeply about bees. I'm known as the bee person, and will probably always be that way until I die. The priority here is to make sure everyone knows about the population of them, what we can do to help them survive, and the things we must do to make their survival our priority. Fire prevention. We've got to do more about fire prevention. Again, losing a beehive because of being overwhelmed by smoke, which as a beekeeper you use to sort of calm them and confuse them. Well, they don't like that all the time, so they'll leave. So we've got to do more about fire prevention. Diversity and equity and inclusion must get better centered in conservation. It has existed primarily as a white-only space, and that needs to change. We can't ask folks to engage in conservation if they don't see others that reflect them in their community, and I'm part of that, so I'm committed to that as well. And want to continue to engage in conservation and get others engaged in it as well. And one of the other ways that we are going to have to do this is we simply have to change the way that we vote in these offices. The land requirement has to go away, and it needs to go to a ballot, because that is how people vote in this state. That is what they're used to. That is how it's going to happen. So those are just some of the priorities I have in if I'm reelected. But whether I'm reelected or not, I will certainly continue on as a conservationist, because that doesn't stop whether I get the office or not. So thank you, everyone, and I ask for your vote.
And Chenka, you're next.
Thank you. So first, I also want to say thank you again to the League of Women Voters for putting on this candidate forum, as well as the King Conservation District for doing such great work to spread the word about this niche but critical election. In our climate crisis, we need decisive action at every level, from federal climate policy to statewide strategies to local goals and actions. But when we think about the tangible impacts of climate change, it comes down to communities and individuals. It's going to be communities that will suffer from extreme heat without adequate tree canopy cover. It's going to be backyard and community gardens that become more and more important as crops are impacted around the world. And it's going to be you, me, and our neighbors that will have to come together to protect our remaining natural areas and take collective and individual action to ensure the health and resilience of our communities. That's why the work of the Conservation District is so important, and that's why I'm running. I hope to use my extensive experience in conservation and natural resource management to yield tangible results for communities across the county. At the end of my term, I would hope to see greater awareness and participation in KCD's programs and services. I'd want communities and individuals who might have thought land ownership was permanently out of reach to now see a path forward. I want Indigenous knowledge brought to the forefront as we collaboratively make our county more resilient. And I want to see individuals and organizations doing more to support carbon storage across the landscape. With your vote, we can achieve these things. Together, we can tackle the climate crisis, strengthen our communities, uplift those who have been marginalized and excluded, and create a county that is more just and more resilient. I would be honored to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, and April.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for this opportunity, to the other candidates for their great knowledge and their passions and their work. And I just hope that my stumbling and not knowing anything is a reflection of the other people, the other voters in the county who also didn't know about what KCD does and who they are and what they can do. And my overall goal would just to make KCD more aware in other communities that didn't know about KCD, and saving salmon and their habitat is like the ultimate goal that I have for my life work and anything else that I can bring to the table.
You're muted, Heather.
That was because my son wandered in. Zoom. Thank you so much to the three of you for participating in this forum. And thanks so much to our viewers for submitting questions. I'm going to turn it over to Paula now, who's going to walk folks through how to access your ballot so you can vote for one of these fine folks and help get out the vote even more than in past election years. So Paula, are you ready to take it away?
I am ready, and thanks,
Okay.
Heather, and thanks again to the candidates. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say a couple of things about this election. Although the district relies primarily on electronic ballot access, all ballots are tabulated by King County Elections, and King County Elections will report the results. The ballots are available now on the King Conservation District website. In fact, you may have already received an email or a postcard, and here's the postcard, announcing the election and giving you instructions on how to cast your vote, including a very helpful QR code to make it really easy. You can access your ballot electronically, return it to King County Elections through a secure portal, and they'll print it off and process it just like every other ballot. So let me just take a moment here and share my screen and show you how easy it is. And I bet when I type in King Conservation, it's going to pop up because I've been there 8,000 times arranging for this forum. Click on King Conservation District, and they have it very easy. Learn more about board elections, click there, scroll down, and go to the voting portal and vote now. Could not be easier, and we do encourage everyone here to cast your vote, and please spread the word to on your network to get folks to vote. Remember that your electronic vote needs to be submitted before 8 p.m. on February 14th. That date is easy to remember. It's Valentine's Day. And just a couple of other things before we close. I want to make a plug for the League of Women Voters. The League was formed over a century ago when women were fighting for the right to vote. We are all about voting. And so we urge you to exercise your right and make your vote heard by voting. And just briefly, as an example of our work, perhaps you're here at this forum tonight because you're concerned about environmental issues. If so, I encourage you to check out the work of our local league's Climate Action Committee. They're working to engage constituents in the democratic process to help local cities achieve their climate goals. You can find more information about the Climate Action Committee and other league projects on the league's website, www.lwvskc.org, and click on Be Involved in Committees. If you value tonight's program, please consider joining the League of Women Voters or donating to the League. We're going to get information on the screen to show you how to do that. Thanks again to Heather, our moderator, and to our candidates and everyone who participated. Thank you again. Have a good night.